Everything we are today and the society we live in is derived from the past, a past that we are fast forgetting. In 1939, there was no India, no Pakistan, no Bangladesh, only the British Raj. The subcontinent was part of a British Empire that had been forced into war by the Nazis of Germany, the fascists of Italy, and the warmongers of Japan. The little island of Britain stood alone, or so the legend goes. But even a magazine of the day saw the fallacy in that argument.
So our poor empire is alone in the world.
Aye, so we are, the whole 500 million of us.
The truth is that Britain had a vast empire to call on for aid. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were self-governing dominions by this time, but would always rally to the call of the mother country. And this was still an empire which girdled the world, tinged the map pink, and on which the sun never set. And the imperial jewel in the crown was India. It was a jewel which provided the raw manpower which helped turn the tide of war. 2.5 million troops, the largest volunteer army the world has ever seen. But this contribution is largely forgotten, and it falls to people like Des MacDougall, who was with the 8th Punjab Regiment of the Indian Army during the war, to remind us of it in the talks he regularly undertakes.
What I'm talking about is the Imperial Indian Army. Now I know words like imperial and empire and colonialism are a bit non-PC these days, but my feeling is that in this case it is an organization, an army we can all be proud of. Not so much perhaps for what it was represented, if you don't, on your personal opinion, but the men who served in it. These guys were absolutely wonderful men. They flocked to join us and fight for us and served us well in their thousands, not just thousands, but millions. And over 300 years we've built them up and into a magnificent fighting force. And these guys were very, very proud to be called soldiers of the Raj.
And it was not the first time the soldiers of the Raj had rushed to defend Britain. In the First World War, the Indian Army contributed over 1 million men and 62,000 lost their lives. And despite Germany's Kaiser claiming that he was a Muslim in an effort to impress his Turkish allies, the first Victoria Cross ever awarded to an Indian went to Khudadad Khan, a sepoy in the 129th Duke of Connaught's own Baluchis. He won his decoration defending his machine gun position at Holbeek in Belgium in 1914. One of 21 Victoria Crosses and 9,200 other bravery awards made to members of the Indian Armed Forces. Just over 20 years later, the world was at war again, and once more, despite a continued drive for independence, Indian soldiers rallied to the British flag. Some of the veterans of that war have now settled in Scotland, and one of them, Darbara Singh Bhullar, recalled the regiment he was with.
ये एक कोर होता है, सिग्नल कोर, क्रॉप्स, यानी वायरलेस कम्युनिकेशन उसमें वायरलेस कम्युनिकेशन भी चलता है, टेलीफोन भी चलता है, फिर डीआर भी चलता है, फिर गाड़ी भी चलता है, यानी कि आगे और पीछे कम्युनिकेशन रखना, ठीक है, बातचीत करना, वो कम्युनिकेशन जैसे भी हो सकता है वैसे ही करना. अगर वायरलेस का टूट जाता है, टेलीफोन का टूट गया, मोटरसाइकिल नहीं जा सकता है, जीप गाड़ी का कम्युनिकेशन लाजमी आगे और पीछे फौज के साथ रखना हमारा ड्यूटी था. सबसे बड़ा फर्ज ये था.
काफी यानी इधर उधर
काफी ज़्यादा उधर फिर हम इस साइड में रहे. बंगाल वगैरह, उड़ीसा वगैरह, ये सब से भीतर से होते हुए हम बर्मा की हद पर पहुंच गए। उधर फिर पहाड़ में जब चले गए तो उधर दो दुश्मन था हमारा।
अच्छा।
एक तो हमारा दुश्मन जापान, दूसरा हमारा दुश्मन मच्छर।
अच्छा, मच्छर भी आपके
मच्छर
दुश्मन थे।
मच्छर जो दुश्मन था हमारा सख्त दुश्मन था,
हाँ।
जिसके वो
ज्यादा खतरनाक कौन था,
मच्छर।
जापानीज के मच्छर?
मच्छर
मच्छर ज्यादा।
पहले मच्छर था।
अच्छा।
मेरा ख्याल है जितनी दुनिया मच्छर में मरी है उतनी गोली में नहीं।
इजाजत नहीं थी, यानी कि लोगों से वहाँ पे जो
नहीं,
civilians
हमें
थे,
कोई
इजाजत नहीं थी।
सेल में हमें कोई कंसर्न नहीं था, ना ही इजाजत होता था। जहाँ पर फौज ने जाना है उस एरिया के अंदर बस हम फौज के एरिया में रहते थे, दायरे में, हम बाहर नहीं जा सकते थे।
अच्छा।
क्योंकि बाहर जाने से हो सकता है हम पानी भी नहीं पी सकते थे।
अच्छा।
हो सकता है कि दुश्मन कई दफ़ा टंकी है पानी की, उसमें पॉइजन डाल देता है।
ये तो देखो ख्याल में भी नहीं आती ऐसी बात। खैर, आपको तो आर्मी में तो पता चलता है।
हाँ, आर्मी
बात
पता
तो
चलता है।
हाँ।
तो वो फिर हम अपने हमारे लिए सेपरेट टेस्ट होकर डॉक्टरी मिलकर राशन भी और ये सामान सब मिलता था। एक दफ़ा क्या हुआ कि शराब के ड्रम थे
जी।
उसके अंदर पॉइजन डाल दिया दुश्मन ने।
अच्छा।
जब पॉइजन डाल दिया तो वो कुछ हमारे लोगों को ये होता है कि शराब है पी लो। तो जब पता लगा तो फौरन हमें उस एरिया में पूरे रेंटों में, जैसा आपको बतलाया है कि कम्युनिकेशन उसके ज़रिए एकदम पता चल जाता है कम्युनिकेशन में कि ये तो पॉइजन है। कोई जवान कोई चीज़ पड़ा है, राशन पड़ा है, कोई चीज़ पड़ा है, वो कोई नहीं खाएगा।
अच्छा, हाथ न लगाए।
हाथ नहीं उसको लगाना, डंप कर देते। फिर उसको पूरे को डंप
आपको
किया।
पता कैसे चला था कि इस ड्रम में पॉइजन है?
तो जब एक आध दो आदमी ने पी लिया
अच्छा,
तो
उनकी हालत खराब हो गई।
खराब हो गई। या कोई भी चीज़ है, डॉक्टर उसको टेस्ट करता है, उससे पता चल जाता है कि पॉइजन है, ये नहीं खाना चाहिए। कोई भी चीज़ दुश्मन का रखा हुआ हाथ नहीं लगाना चाहिए, पाँव नहीं लगाना चाहिए। हो सकता कोई बम हो, पाँव लग गया, वो फट गया, वो भी गलत है। या कोई चीज़ और पड़ा है वो उठाकर मुंह में डाले, वो भी पॉइजन हो सकता है।
किस वजह से या क्या किस सोच में आके आपने आर्मी ज्वाइन की? यानी आप तो इंडिया में थे।
वो समा ऐसा था कि हमारे अंकल जी जो थे वो भी पहले फौज में थे।
जी।
उसके बाद हमारे भाई थे दो, वो भी फौज में ही थे, वो भी इसी लड़ाई में थे।
अच्छा।
39-45 में। उनको देखकर मेरे दिल में भी ख्याल आया कि हमारे अंकल जी हैं, ब्रदर हैं। अंकल जी तो हमारे सन 1914 में थे जंग में।
अच्छा।
तो ब्रदर हमारे 39-45 से पहले थे। तो उनको देखकर मुझे भी ख्याल आया कि ये फौज में हैं तो मैं भी फौज में भर्ती हो जाऊँ।
आपकी वालदा ने या आपके घर वालों ने कुछ नहीं कहा इस बात में?
घर वालों को मैंने बतलाया ही नहीं जब
अच्छा।
भर्ती हुआ। मदर नहीं थी हमारी, तो हम ही थे, दो उधर थे, एक मेरे से छोटा भाई था। वो देखकर मेरी तरफ देखकर वो भी हो गया।
तो आपको घर की याद नहीं आती थी?
उधर तो कुछ भी नहीं याद आता, उधर तो सब फ्रंट भाई भाई हो जाते हैं।
हाँ, ये तो है।
कोई डिस्ट्रिक्ट का हो, कोई कहीं हो, कोई कहीं हो, बिल्कुल कोई थोड़ा टाइम याद आता है, उसके बाद कोई याद नहीं आता। पूरे के पूरे जो हैं वो सब भाइयों की तरह हो जाते हैं। एक दूसरे के साथ हमदर्दी हो जाती है, प्यार हो जाता है,
और क्या,
रहना सहना।
मसरूफियत इतनी हो जाती है।
हाँ जी,
मसरूफियत इतनी हो जाती है कि टाइम ही नहीं मिलता है।
टाइम नहीं मिलता है। अपना कट्ठे रहना, कट्ठे नहाना, कट्ठे खाना, कट्ठे परेड करना, कट्ठे ने जाना, कट्ठों ने आना, कट्ठे ने एक रूम में टेंट में सोना, वो भाइयों से भी ज़्यादा हो जाता है।
ये तो है।
अगर एक बीमार हो जाता है दूसरा उसके साथ हमदर्दी करता है। अगर एक गोली लग गया ये कोशिश करता है कि मेरा भाई है इसको मैं ठा कर लूँ, अपनी पीठ पर उसको ठा कर भी लाता है, बेशक उसका मौत हो जाए, इतना प्यार हो जाता है,
इतनी
मोहब्बत हो जाती है।
तो आपकी कभी मुलाकात ब्रिटिश ऑफिसर से कभी होती थी?
ब्रिटिश अफसर जो थे हमारे बड़े अफसर होते थे, कर्नल वगैरह, लेफ्टिनेंट कर्नल, मेजर साहब, ऐसे कमीशन अफसर होते थे।
जी हाँ। तो मतलब आपको कभी वो हुक्म देते थे या?
हुक्म देते थे, उनका ऑर्डर चलता था।
अच्छा, उनका ऑर्डर चलता
उनका
था।
ऑर्डर चलता था। फौज में तो एक चेन है,
जी हाँ।
ऊपर से नीचे तक को हुक्म चलेगा, कोई आपके दिमाग का बात नहीं। आपको
मतलब आपके दिल में कभी ये बात नहीं आई कि ये तो ब्रिटिश है, हम ब्रिटिश नहीं हैं?
नहीं, पहले नहीं आता था, उसके बाद ये बातें चली हैं।
अच्छा, बाद में
बाद
आप इसका बताएं कि बाद में, कब बाद में?
बाद में जंग जब खत्म होने लगा,
अच्छा, उसके बाद। हाँ,
उसके बाद बातें चली।
यानी कि जंग जब चल रही थी
उस वक्त
तो
नहीं पता।
भाई भाई की तरह थे।
हाँ।
बेशक आप ब्रिटिश हो या इंडियन हो या कहाँ के।
हाँ हाँ,
ठीक है।
हम तो पूरी सपोर्ट करते थे, सब कुछ।
जी
उसके
हाँ।
बाद फिर ये बात शुरू होने लगा जब हम दूसरी कंट्रियों में चले गए, जर्मनी में चले गए, कुछ हम कैदी हो गए। जर्मनी तो खैर हमारे साथ बहुत अच्छा सलूक किया।
अच्छा, जर्मन ने आपके साथ अच्छा सलूक?
हाँ, इंडियन आर्मी के साथ बहुत अच्छा सलूक किया।
अच्छा।
बुरा किया तो जापान ने किया।
आप कह रहे हैं जर्मन ने आपके साथ अच्छा सलूक किया।
हाँ।
आप समझते हैं कि उनके दिल से ये बात थी कि कोई वजह थी, यानी कि वो शायद ये चाहते हों कि आपके साथ अच्छा सलूक करके आप
नहीं,
उनकी साइड
ये
चले जाएं?
यानी कि खुदा से जैसे हम डरते हैं,
जी हाँ।
कहीं गाइड से डरें कि कहीं गाइड कहे कि अगर हम गाइड के बरखिलाफ कोई बात करते हैं तो हमारे दिल में असर पड़ता है कि हम ये किया तो गाइड हमें ये करेगा,
हम्म।
खराब काम होगा।
जी हाँ।
ये उनके दिल में यही ख्याल था जर्मन के कि इंसान जो है वो सब एक है।
अच्छा।
जे अगर लड़ते हैं तो अपने पेट के लिए लड़ते हैं। तो मगर ये तो नहीं कि ब्रिटिश के साथ हम अच्छा सलूक करें तो इंडियन के साथ बुरा करें।
हाँ हाँ।
वो इंसान समझते थे।
अच्छा।
You can't really believe that we could have won the war without the Indian Army. Without the Indian Army, the Japanese would have overrun India. They'd have linked up with the Germans in Iran, and the whole world would have come under the domination of the Axis alliance. Captain John Tucker, 5th Indian Division.
Volunteers for the vast army came for all sorts of reasons. Emmanuel Singh recalls why he joined up.
An idea to go to army. I was just went to the for some shopping actually in the town, and on the way actually I found that there was a camp, and some of the men were standing on the road, and he had a stick actually, and the stick on there was I don't know, just by the way I asked what's that, because I see that on the stick there was a what you call it, a
Sign?
No. On the stick was for measuring the height of the stick. So that I said that what's it for? He said that for measuring the height. I said, well, what you do? He said that we analyze the young boys and young people to the army. I said, do you think I'm fit for that? He said, oh, sure, yes. And
So you had to reach a certain height?
So yes, I don't know. He said that. I don't know whether I was over 5 feet anyway at that time. So he said that you wanted to go. I said, okay. I have no idea that what army like actually, what I will be there. So he took me to a camp, and there was a captain. He asked me, and fortunately I could speak English because English, I was studied in a mission school actually, it's an American mission school, so I knew can speak a bit of English. So he was very happy. He said that okay, I will send you to the camp, and there you have the choice actually where you want to go. I said okay. Then same night I went. I just back home and took some money from my mother. My father never knew actually. I knew that if he knew, he won't let me go. So I took some money. I didn't tell my mother where I'm going actually. Anyway, I just took money. And then they just took me by the train to Jalandhar camp, same night. And Jalandhar camp about 2 o'clock in the night time, we reached actually there. And that's it. From there, it's a new life start. And I was after a week, I was about to run away from there because it was so hard over there in the camp. It's like a prisoner, you're a prisoner because all around there was this army people actually around us. They took us right in the time in the morning to wake up in the morning, early in the morning. They took us all to the toilets and then took us all to the showers and then bring it and then we have to go to the mess and eat it and then they took us for the parade and also it's very hard. So fortunately in the night, in the evening roll call, there was one, the captain comes and this jacket, all this roll call, they call it, and he just passed and then I shouted, can I speak to sir? And he was surprised. I said, I'll speak because most of the people were there. They keep all the one in the villages and all these people, they came, whether you are educated or not, they kept it in one place. And from there they posted into the different places actually in the army or in the Air Force and the Navy, like this one. So then he spoke. I said that 1 week I'm going to run away.
You told him?
I told him, I said, because I'm fed up with this. Then he took my name and he said, next day they called me in there and they posted me in the Royal Indian Army in Lahore.
Des McDougall had this to say about why he joined the Indian Army.
I had 1 or 2 relations in the Indian Army, but the main reason was a cousin of mine, he was in the Marathas, and he was very badly wounded in Italy, lost an eye. And when he was back in England recuperating, I used to go down, he lived in Kent, and I used to go down, it was in the summer holidays, I was still at school, and I used to go down and speak to him. We'd go for long walks across the moorlands there. And he was absolutely sold on the Indian Army. He loved it. He was a regular, had been in just before the war. And he told me all the stories about the Marathas, the Indian Army, and generally. And he had the biggest influence on my life for joining it was entirely through him virtually that I decided that was for me.
What were you actually in the Army? What was your position in the Army?
Well, that time I was an officer cadet. And then we went to Bangalore. Spent 3 dreadful days on a train in a 3rd-class Indian compartment. There was about 30 of us in there, and I slept on I was lucky I got the luggage rack to sleep on. And but then I was an officer cadet, but then I was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant, very new. But I came out as a captain in 1947.
Do you ever worry that the Japanese would invade India?
No. Well, I suppose at one stage we thought that it was pretty dicey, but we didn't really give it any thought. We thought they'd probably be held. And in fact, they were at a place called Kohima, which was a tremendous battle, very underrated, or not very underrated, very underpublished, if you like. We hear all about Arnhem and Dunkirk, both of which were defeats, but a terrible time they had. But Kohima was a fantastic battle. The Indian Army, the Indians and the British troops there fought an absolutely incredibly hard, vicious, ruthless, terrible battle there. And nobody in this country knows anything about it. It's hardly ever mentioned, even then.
Did you see any of the actual action?
No. The war finished about 3 days before I was commissioned. I felt I'd been cheated. In fact, all the people my age, we all felt that, we all great sense of disappointment in a way. Looking back, of course, we realised probably how lucky we were, but even so, you feel you've been cheated of something.
Did anybody tell you about any of you're talking about the atrocities that
Yes.
happened. Can you perhaps tell us about a particular one that stuck in your mind?
Well, yes, because at OTS we had a number of ex-British other ranks who were coming through and going for sergeants and sergeant majors and that sort of thing, who decided to try and increase their lifespan after a couple of years in Burma and go for a commission. And one of them had the most terrible wounds in his stomach, which he used to show us, which was bayonet wounds. And he'd been temporarily captured by the Japanese, strapped to a tree and used for bayonet practice. And he was very lucky to be alive. Although he'd been bayoneted 3 times, each time it had missed, a really fatal point. And he lived a long time in hospital. He was rescued because there was a sudden counter-attack, and they managed to get him back. But that was one of the things that really stuck in my mind.
Can you tell us what were your opinion of the Indian soldiers?
Yes, they were absolutely marvellous. They really were. Not only were they good soldiers, they were keen, they were enthusiastic, they gave everything to it, and they were good soldiers and became good friends. I had a batman, and he was an ugly pockmarked little sod, about 5'4", and he was a good soldier, and he became a very good friend as well as being a good batman. And he was, brave. They were brave. They were loyal, and they were such great company, tremendous company. And I found out, I arrived at the regimental centre after I'd been commissioned, sort of a wet behind the ears, ex-schoolboy, second lieutenant, absolutely useless at anything. And there we had the VCOs, Indian officers, the VCO rank, which came between commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers. It was a special rank, unique to the Indian Army. And they were men, absolutely fantastic men. They had to be really good to become VCOs. They all had about 20 years service at least. And some of them up to 40, 43, 45 years service in the Army. And they were father figures. And they took me under their wing. They not just me, but other idiots like myself who were just young and not knowing a great deal about what was going on in the military life. They guided us. They were sort of guide philosophers and friends. They helped to teach us the language, although many of them couldn't speak very good English. But they were tremendous help, fantastic people. So were the guys, the ordinary soldiers, absolutely marvellous. They're so keen, so full of life, they're, cheerful. They had a huge sense of humour, and it was always bubbling there just under the surface and ready to come out. They loved something funny, and took great pride or great joy in British officers doing something stupid. So I really like them.
Okay, could you tell us about the work you do for the Auchinleck Appeal, and why do you do this?
The Auchinleck Memorial Appeal was created to provide help for them, let them live out their lives in some sort of security and die with the sort of dignity that they deserve. And I thought this was a good idea, and I started raising money for them. By first of all, selling pictures of paintings or prints of paintings of Indian Army people. And then that market dried up. And so I decided, I had an idea, I could and set up an exhibition. So I had a lot of photographs, and I got a lot of these photographs, blew them up on photocopiers, and some of the paintings I'd done, I blew those up to A3 size, and created an exhibition. And the library service was always tremendously good for me. It's very difficult to get people prepared to give you space, but so I set them up in my local library, and then a whole lot of other libraries. Then after about a year of that, I thought I would start giving talks about it. And I thought, well, I'll try it anyway. I gave a talk to my local camera club, because I was a member, and that went down very well. And so I started contacting other clubs and organisations and doing a bit of advertising, just as cheap as possible, because everything you do, we do, the officers of the Indian Army Association, we pay for everything. Every penny goes to the fund. And so I was producing leaflets and that sort of thing to leave in libraries and advertising the fact that I did talks. Again, library's good, they're putting up posters for me. It's been really rather, it's come, I've raised, it's not a great sum. I think I'm on about 2,130 at the moment, spread over about 3.5 years. It's all difficult. It comes in dribs and drabs. Sometimes you go to an organisation. For instance, I talk to the Probus clubs quite a lot. And one of them I won't specify, it was absolutely brilliant. Well, it was, and they all at the end they came round and they're lashings around, and there's about £50 in the kitty for it. And the next one was at a very affluent area, and I know there's lots of money there, and nobody gave a penny. These things happen, you just accept them. And I try and raise that money. I feel I'm giving something back to these guys.
So you feel that you're getting quite a lot of support from the general public?
Oh yes, yes indeed. And there's a lot of moral support, and people write in and say, how interested they were in the thing, and ask for information, further information about it. Last year I had a display towards the end of the year at the Royal Highland Fusilier Museum in Tuckyhall Street. Now they were very good, gave me a good space for 3 weeks. And one of the nice things about these things, you get the unexpected turning up. I gave an American turned up. He looked a bit like Moe from the Three Stooges. He was probably well before your time. He had his wife was a Glasgow wifey, and he said when he came in, "Oh, I'd like to contribute to the Gurkhas." And I thought, oh, here we go, And I explained that I wasn't actually collecting; they have their own setup for collecting the Gurkhas. But I sat him down and I gave him the facts of life about the Gurkhas. And he'd never heard of the Indian Army. He'd heard of the Gurkhas, but I mean, the Gurkhas were about 5% of the Indian Army. Great men, lovely, wonderful men, great fighting men, but they were a very small percentage. So I told him about this, and his wife put a couple of coins into the collecting box before they left, and he took some leaflets with him. And then 3 months later, the Secretary of the Indian Army Association wrote to me to say that he'd just had a cheque for £150 from this American who'd been very impressed with hearing all about this, and he felt very strongly that something should be done to help these men, and he'd learned a great deal from it. And would we accept a cheque for 150 quid, which, is great when that happens, wonderful.
Do you feel that society as a whole respects and thinks highly of the veterans of the war? Or do you think the veterans have been forgotten?
Well, certainly the veterans of the Indian Army have been forgotten. Now we're coming up to the Armistice Day, roughly about 8 weeks away now, and every year I sit and I listen to the radio or I watch the television ceremonies at the Cenotaph and maybe the Albert Hall, and the commentators, they talk about the Empire rallying around, and the Canadians and the Australians, the New Zealanders and the South Africans, but you never hear the word Indian. Never hear the word Indian, and that, it gets up my nose a bit, because the Indian Army put more men into the field in both world wars, twice the number of men than the rest of the empire put together. I mean, the last war, they put 2.5 million men into the field by 1944. 2.5 million, every single one of them a volunteer. And you never hear anything about it now. And yet, without them, we'd have been a second-rate power as far as the war was concerned. But because they fought in pretty well every battlefront, and 20% of our troops at Alamein were Indian, and which you don't sort of hear about. And then 50% of our troops in Italy were Indian Army, and 75% of the troops in Burma were Indian Army. And in fact, in Burma, the Indian Army, and this is part of the forgotten army business again, the Indian Army in Burma inflicted more casualties on the Japanese army than the Americans did in the whole of the Pacific War since Pearl Harbor. But, you've all seen the films, Guadalcanal and Okinawa and all this sort of thing from the Americans, and you'd think, they were the only ones who really did any damage. The Indian Army was a fantastic success.
My Indian divisions were among the best in the world. They would go anywhere, do anything, go on doing it, and do it in very little. Field Marshal Bill Slim, Commander, Allied Armies, Burma.
Thakur Singh Padda fought and was wounded in Burma. तो आप हमें बता सकते हैं कि आप जब आर्मी में थे, तो आप जब आर्मी में थे आप, तो आपकी क्या पोजीशन थी आर्मी में?
हवलदार।
सिर्फ हवलदार थे?
हाँ।
और कोई आपने पोजीशन इख्तियार की?
हो जाना सी जख्मी हो खत्म हो गया।
अच्छा, सिर्फ आप हवलदार हैं, कैप्टन कभी नहीं बने आप?
नहीं बने।
अच्छा, तो जब आप हवलदार थे तो आप बकायदा बंदूक उठा के चलते थे लड़ाई
हाँ,
में?
पहले बंदूक से उन्होंने ऊपर एने बिंट से मारना,
अच्छा,
फिर वो रफला हट गया, फिर गड्ढा आ गया, टॉमी गन, ब्रेन गन।
अच्छा ठीक है, तो जब आप जंग में थे
हाँ,
तो आपने कौन से मुल्क में लड़ाई लड़ी?
बर्मा माडरे,
अच्छा, तो आप थोड़ा सा और बताएं।
बर्मा माडरे।
बर्मा में तो आप थे,
हाँ।
तो फिर आपने वहाँ पे क्या किया?
है
आपने क्या किया वहाँ पर बर्मा में?
वो दुश्मन के साथ लड़ाई थी, जापान के साथ, काफ़ी आदमी मारे, मरे भी। वो जब जर्मन की लड़ाई फतेह हो गई आ, सब यूनिट इधर आ गई, घेरा घत लिया, चार फेरियो, लख आदमी मारता, लख नू कैद कर लिया।
अच्छा, तो आप वहाँ पे मौजूद थे जब
हाँ।
उसको पकड़ा?
कल देखो ये बम लगा,
आप जख्मी हो गए थे?
ये देखो नस टूटी है,
हाँ।
आ बम लगा, गिट्टा गिट्टा तोड़या, तोड़ के लाया हिलदा नहीं, दिखावा जराब ला के।
नहीं नहीं, कोई बात नहीं। तो आप जख्मी हो गए थे?
हाँ।
और ये बर्मा में हुआ था?
बर्मा।
अच्छा ठीक है, तो आप जब जख्मी हुए थे
हाँ,
तो क्या किया? आर्मी ने आपके साथ कैसे बर्ताव किया?
बहुत अच्छा।
आप बताएं क्या हुआ?
हमारा इलाज बहुत हुआ, 4 दफ़ा तो हमको हेलीकॉप्टर में दूसरे अस्पताल खड़ा, फिर पुणे में रहा 1 साल 3 महीने। बहुत अच्छी खुराक थी, बहुत अच्छा रैंक बैंड थी।
अच्छा, तो आप हॉस्पिटल में थे वहाँ पर?
हाँ,
तो वहाँ पे आप बताएं कि नर्सेज कैसी थी, डॉक्टर्स कैसे थे?
हमारे वास्ते बहुत अच्छे थी, नर्सा भी, डॉक्टर भी, घंटे घंटे बाद खान नू मिलता थी।
तो डॉक्टर्स नर्सेज ब्रिटिश थे या?
ब्रिटिश सी, नर्सा देसी भी सी, ब्रिटिश सी।
और डॉक्टर भी?
हाँ, डॉक्टर भी।
अच्छा, मैं चाह रही हूँ कि आप बताएं कि जैसे कि आपने अपनी आंखों से देखा
हाँ,
किसी को मरते हुए या जख्मी होते हुए,
सब
आप उसके बारे में बताएं कि वो हादसा कैसे हुआ?
पहला जब ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਵਧੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇੱਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਦੇ ਲਾਗੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਿੰਡ ਸੀ, ਉਹਦੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਗੋਲੀ ਵੱਜੀ, ਇੱਥੋਂ ਨਿਕਲ ਗਈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਪੱਟੀਆਂ ਪੁੱਟੀਆਂ ਵੱਜੀਆਂ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਤੀਜੇ ਦਿਨ ਉਹਦੀ ਮੌਤ ਹੋ ਗਈ।
पट्टियाँ किसने बांधी?
ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਫੀਡ ਪੱਟੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ,
अच्छा,
ਉਹ ਬੰਨ੍ਹਦੇ ਕਿਤੇ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਉਹ ਬੰਨ੍ਹ ਦੇਣੀ। ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਜ਼ਖਮੀ ਹਾਂ, ਫੀਡ ਪੱਟੀ ਬੱਧੀ ਆ, ਪੱਗ ਬੱਧੀ, ਖੂਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਇਆ।
आप थोड़ा सा बताएं शुरू में आपने कैसे आर्मी में ज्वाइन किया?
हमारा बाप भी नौकर से, हमारा ताया भी नौकर से। तो हम जब तगड़ा हुआ तो हमको भी शौक आ गया भर्ती होने का। तो उस वक्त साढ़े 13.5 रुपये तनख्वाह थी सारी। जब 2 साल तो बाद रोमन उर्दू का 3rd क्लास कर लिया तो फिर 16 लगती थी। जब मैं हौलदार जख्मी हुआ मेरी 27 रुपये तनख्वाह सारी।
तो ये जो आपको तनख्वाह मिलती थी,
हाँ जी,
आप इसको वापस घर भेज देते थे, इंडिया भेज देते थे?
मैं लिखाता थी अपनी माई को कि मेरी तनख्वाह जी इन्नी इन मिलती जाए। मैं सिर्फ 5 रुपये कोल रखता सी महीने के, ज़्यादा नहीं, पिछे मिलती जाती सी।
और जब आप आर्मी में थे
हाँ,
तो आपको खाना वाना कैसे देते थे? अच्छा देते? उसके बारे में
बहुत
आप बताएं,
बहुत
क्या
अच्छा,
मिलता था आपको?
बहुत अच्छा, बहुत अच्छा।
आप बताएं क्या मिलता था, आप क्या खाते थे, कैसे रहते थे?
4 दिन वीक में मीट, एकदम चौल, एकदम कड़ा, सब्जी, बदल बदल के चीज़ देते थे। आज सब्जी दी है, कल में दाल देंगे, परसों मीट देंगे। बहुत अच्छी अच्छी खुराक सी।
और आपके रहने का, जहाँ आप रहते थे वो कैसा था? मतलब अच्छे थे?
बारगाह बढ़िया सी,
क्या बनी थी?
बारगाह
अच्छा,
ਵਿੱਚ ਮੰਜੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹ ਉੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ।
सारे के सारे?
हाँ, नहीं साड़ी ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮਿਸੀ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਸੀ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਰੋਹਤਕ ਦੇ ਜਾਠਾਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਰਾਵਲਪਿੰਡੀ ਦੇ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਪਠਾਨਾਂ ਦੀ मिस्सा ग्रुप से अम्बाला ग्रुप मिस्सा से
भी बना दिया तो फिर आपको कैसे महसूस होता था?
फिर कुछ नहीं कहना
आपका कोई दोस्त बन गया उनमें से?
दुश्मन के साथ दोस्ती नहीं जो गोरखा थी ना नेपाली ये मारते खोखरी ना कोल होंगे सी एक खोखरी मारते सी कहना हमारा भात खाएगा हमारे चौल खाएगा हम नहीं कहना जरा आदमी कैदी हो गया उन्हें की कहना
कभी उन्होंने कोशिश की कि हम यहाँ से निकल के भाग जाएं जो आपके कैदी थे?
बात तार लगी सी
अच्छा
बहुत संगनी वो बिजली ने तारा छड़ियाँ सी निकल ही नहीं सकता बाहर
उसके बारे में बताएं उस दौरान में आपने कैसे महसूस किया आपको कैसा लगा आप क्या कर रहे थे और बम कहाँ फटा आपके पास फटा दूर फटा?
हमारे जैसे ये मकान है इन्होंने पौड़ियाँ उच्चियाँ उधर बर्मा च यहो जिहा मकान से इन्होंने पौड़ियाँ उच्चियाँ सी दिल बंब लगा तो मैं वो पौड़ियाँ ते ओले डिग पिया बहुत फैर हुआ सब कुछ है लेकिन मेरा होर नहीं लगा कोई भी ये बम भी लगा सर
बम का एक उसका हिस्सा लगा कि पत्थर लगा ये क्या लगा जिस
बम का हिस्सा लगा अजय भी ये बच्चा एक समय तो बच्चा 3 टुकड़े बम दे आते
अच्छा
ये बच्चा 3 टुकड़े बम दे है मैं डॉक्टर ਨੂੰ क्या कर लियो ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਗੋਸ਼ਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੇ ਹੱਡੀ ਨਾ ਖਾਂਦੇ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਫੇਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਆ हड्डी ना नहीं खाने का कोई नुकसान नहीं।
तो अभी तक है?
हाँ अभी तक है।
आपको तकलीफ होती है?
नहीं कोई तकलीफ।
Thakur Singh Padda was awarded 5 medals for his services to the Raj. 2 have been lost through the passing of time, but he retains the other 3 with pride. The facts speak for themselves. The Indian Army fought in France, Italy, Sicily, Greece, Sudan, Somaliland, Eritrea, Abyssinia, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Persia, Syria, Iraq, Hong Kong, Malaya, Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and Burma. Indians received neither the same pay nor the same living conditions as British soldiers. 33,000 lost their lives, 67,000 were wounded. The high casualty count emphasizes that many of these soldiers were frontline troops. 30,000 others served in the Royal Indian Navy, while countless thousands of Lascars or Indian seamen served in the Merchant Marine. Almost 30,000 fought with the Royal Indian Air Force, with the same number acting as non-combatants. 8 million people were in the defence services, 5 million in war industries, and another million in the vital railways. Not all of these people were heroes in the accepted sense, but their contribution did much to provide the platform for genuine heroes. One genuine hero was Gyan Singh VC, now sadly no longer with us, but his son Charanjit has vivid memories of his father.
Only time he used to talk about war was when he had few drinks. I suppose that's the only time. Other than that, he was very. I think he didn't want to remember all this. I think the war was really terrible. Whenever he used to talk about war, it wasn't a good memory. It was awful. It was really bad.
Did he ever tell you a story that really stuck in your mind? You know that.
I can picture. I mean, since we was little kids, you can say he used to tell us, right? I mean, it's like an Indian film. You can say, you know, the war is going on, and you can see the death right in front of him. All the anti-tank guns are firing at you, and there's nothing to protect you. It's just a wasteland, and they was following with the tanks, and because they had an anti-tank gun, and the tanks was destroyed, and there was no way, you know. So the battlefield was really, really the way he described. I think it was terrible.
Did he ever mention his colleagues in the war, and perhaps he was confronted by the enemy? How did he relate to his colleagues round about him?
Yeah, he actually remembered them I would say, because all his section got killed. He was the only survivor.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
whenever he talked about them, he talked by, he was almost in tears because obviously they wasn't there anymore.
Mhm. And you say he was the only survivor. How did he manage to survive?
Well, I suppose he was right in the middle of with the firing line. Tanks couldn't go forward because they had anti-tank gun, and all their positions was in a foxhole. Foxholes are dig deep into the ground where you can't see anything ground level, so you can't fire at the position. The only way you can destroy them was, or destroy the anti-tank gun, was go as near as possible, throw hand grenade into their foxholes, destroy them. That's the only way. But to go near them was all plain land. The only way you can go is crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason actually all his section got killed. And he knew that, I mean, he couldn't go back. I mean, he knew. That's what he always used to say. Sometime when we was a little kid, we used to ask, Dad, why didn't you just go back? Why you knew that you're going to get killed? He goes, there was no way. If I would have gone back, they would have shot me anyway. So the only way to survive was to kill them and survive.
And go
And that's what he
forward.
did.
Yeah.
When he got the Victoria Cross, the whole regiment came to my village. And in those days, people like that to come to a village, it was a big thing. I'm talking about a long time. I mean, villages were never used to a city life. They probably didn't even see a car or a jeep or something like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole regiment came to our village, which is about 7-8 miles from a main city, and the whole regiment stayed there for about 4 or 5 days, and some of the villagers saw the white man for the first time in their life, so
Wow.
they wasn't aware of,
Wow.
and they was distributing, because it was an all happy occasion, they was distributing the sweets to the whole village, and they was asking the villagers, what you want, because you produced one of the wonderful soldiers for us. What do you want? What your requirements are? So, I mean, around our village, the whole, I would say about 10, 12 villages was gathered there, and they was all talking about that, and everybody was feeling proud that, it's something great.
One of the reasons Indian veterans settled in Scotland in the years following the war is because of the military heritage the Indian and the Scot have shared for over 150 years. A mutual respect grew between the Jocks and the warriors they had to face on behalf of the British Empire. This respect created a deadly partnership, and over the years, Indian Army regiments and their Scottish brothers in arms gained over 200 battle honours together. During World War II, they fought at each other's sides in Africa, Italy, Hong Kong, Malaya, and Burma. Nowadays, in memory of that brotherhood, almost every regiment in the Indian and Pakistani armies has a pipe band, and it is fitting that when the British left the subcontinent in 1947, the last regiment to leave was the 42nd Highlanders, the Black Watch.
The achievements in combat of these Indian soldiers is noteworthy. They have carried on successfully in grim and bloody fighting against a tenacious enemy. No obstacle has succeeded in delaying these Indian troops for long, or in lowering their morale and fighting spirit. Your Joanne has established firm bonds of friendship and respect, born in action against a tough enemy. General Mac Clark, Commander, Allied Forces, Italy.
Everything we are today is derived from the past. A brutal past. War and the destruction it brings is always the final sanction. It requires sacrifice, and it is a credit to the human spirit that when the darkness threatened, so many soldiers from across the globe were willing to lay down their lives to defeat it. These veterans deserve our gratitude because their deeds 50 years ago allow us the freedoms we enjoy today. From the Americas and Europe, from the West Indies and Asia, from Australasia and Africa, and yes, from the Indian subcontinent, they banded together and fought in a common cause.